Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. It is time for episode 19 of season 1 of UXR Conversations. Don't know when season 2 will be, but I'm not planning on waiting too long. So you'll have to wait and see. I am Noam. I'm Director of User Research at Wellfund. I'm also the guy who believes that if you are customer obsessed, you should go see a therapist. But anyway, I'm on countless social platforms, way too many social platforms, probably, including a couple I'm not the core demographic for. WhatsApp, TikTok. TikTok is great. Recently, I've been wondering about the state of social UX research and how researchers, teams, companies are using social data in research, what insights we can glean from peeking into people's online social lives, how this type of research fits into the broader research programs within companies and teams, and also, which is incredibly important, and we've seen what happens when it's not that way, how can you conduct social research in an ethical way which respects people's privacy and security? Because that can go wrong sometimes, as we've seen. So, to answer these 3 questions and many more, I'm sure I have a special guest today, the annoyingly talented fellow Israeli, Yael Oppenheim. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Noam. Thank you so much. I'm so excited and happy to be here. It's a real pleasure. And thank you
Let me
for sweet introduction.
Well, I'm not done yet. I mean, let me explain to people why I said you're annoyingly talented. So you are a UX researcher, as am I, but you are also a market researcher, and that got a bit too boring for you. So you decided to found your own company, which we will talk about a bit. And I just heard you're also getting your PhD. So this all sounds crazy and incredible. You design, lead, and execute research projects that help other organizations, startups, identify their customers' needs and motivations and understand their competitive landscape. And you specialize in utilizing social data, social analytics in order to, deliver those insights. So we're going to focus mostly on that and what we chose to call here social data research. So that's the focus of today. You're also the founder of FitMyTime, which people can check out if you go to the website below. FitMyTime is a platform for remote personal fitness and yoga classes, and it could not be a better time for that startup. I imagine. My daughter has been doing Cosmic Kids yoga. Have you heard of Cosmic Kids yoga?
Sure, of course I have. Yeah.
So good. Three Little Piggies yoga, the Gruffalo yoga, incredible. So I should probably join, but I
You
haven't.
should.
I haven't. So a lot to talk about today, and just a reminder to people watching, if you have any questions, please send them to us on YouTube, preferably. You can also send them, I think, on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want updates on upcoming content and anything else, then you can subscribe below to my YouTube channel, which is called UX Quests. So before we jump deep into social data research, I have a question for you. What does your social app folder look like on your phone? What social apps are you using currently?
Well, I'm trying to keep it, not so busy. But yeah, I'm using Instagram, of course, and Facebook. These are the two main ones. I don't use any others on my mobile at the moment.
But you put them in a folder, right? You're not a psychopath. You're not one of those people who doesn't have folders on her phone.
I have folders, yeah.
Thank goodness. Okay, just check. That's the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Good thing that I answered correctly to that question.
So I always like to start by just briefly going over your journey into all of the things you've been up to recently. How did you get into UX research, and how did you learn the skills and the tools and get the knowledge necessary to do this type of research which we're about to talk about today?
Yeah, cool. So actually, I started, same as you with academic studies. So I did my bachelor's and master's degree in communication here in Israel, which, by the way, I highly recommend to anyone who wants to go into user research. That's a great way to start. Actually, it's not the only way, obviously, but it's a great way to start because you get to learn, all the research methods, all the traditional research methods, like, interviewing and surveys, and lots of, or not lots, but enough of statistics, so you can master both qualitative and quantitative methods. And, you learn about culture and how to research culture and cultural behavior. And also, you tap into a little bit of social psychology and anthropology and all kinds of, and sociology. And, you tap into a lot of subjects that are really valuable as a user and a market researcher. So I highly recommend that. So after
And sorry, just to be clear, by that you mean a communications track? Is that what you mean, as opposed to other fields or something else?
Yeah, I mean, like media and communication studies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And what happened after that?
So after that, I plan to continue directly to do a PhD, but then I changed my mind and I decided that I want to get some real work done, to have some industry experience. But I didn't want to do any, I wasn't very fascinated about, surveys and interviews and focus groups. But I did started to hear about other types of research that include digital research and analytics, and using like social media to do research, which was, it's still considered innovative, but it was also, it was just the beginning of this of social media, social data research. And then I found, we have this amazing company in Israel called Bazilla, which is a social media monitoring company and a research consulting company, which is like the equivalent. You have many social media, social data monitoring companies in the world. So we have in Israel Bazilla, which is they build an amazing software. So I spent a couple of years working there and doing lots of, first, just learning what is the software, what kind of research can you do with it, what kind of questions you can ask using this type of method, this type of software, what are the limitations. And I work mainly with big companies like corporations in Israel who are mainly using this type of research, and also NGOs, and many types of research. So I've gathered, and I've had some experience with media research and finance and fashion and food and beverage. So you name it, I think we've tapped almost to any type of industry here. Which was amazing. And I did a bunch of other stuff in addition. And then, like two and a half years ago, I started FitMyTime, which was completely unrelated to my job, to my work as a researcher. It happened because I felt, there were many like insights that led me to start with FitMyTime. But basically, I thought that, okay, we are used to working out like with YouTube and apps. So what if we could just, in addition to seeing the trainer, we could also talk to them and get feedback? Because the only way to get feedback is when you hire a personal trainer to come to your house, or when you go to a studio. So like everyone, I also had a studio subscription. My studio was like 10 minutes walk from my house, but I didn't go as much as I wanted to or should have, because you want to be there for a specific class with your favorite teacher, and you can't always make it. So, one thing to another, and then churn happens, right?
Yep.
So that's more or less how it started. And of course, I used all my knowledge to do user market research before that. Learned a lot, did a bunch of mistakes. early days. Yeah, so that's about FitMyTime, and I continued to do research. I never quit. And during the time that I was working on FitMyTime, I also I spent 6 months at WeWork Labs, which was an amazing experience. WeWork Labs, they were just starting in Israel. That was about a year and a half ago, something like that. And then there I met, many other startups, early stage startups. And we were like talking and helping each other's out. And I noticed that many of them are really struggling with, market research, and not to mention user research, which is nothing. I mean, nobody was even aware of that like concept, right? But entrepreneurs, they always hear from their like potential investors, or by other people who ask them, but wait, have you done market research? Do you have like the data? Do you have, who are your competitors? All of those kind of stuff.
So you've done a lot of advising for these entrepreneurs.
Yes,
Within
and I
WeWork.
realized, yeah, it started with WeWork Labs, and then I continued to do that with to do like workshops and work with other accelerators in Israel. Because the one thing that is really, it's really, you see it a lot with early stage startups, especially with entrepreneurs which are just starting their journey. So when you think of like, how does it work? When you think of a startup idea, right? So you do like, in order to validate the concept, you normally do three things. So you ask your friends and family, what do they think about your idea? Will it work? Which is mistake number one. Mistake number two, you ask your potential clients, customers, you ask them, will you use my product, my app, my service? Mistake number two. And if they're really trying to do like a good research, they prepare a survey, like with Google Docs or Google Server or something like that. And then they ask, in the survey, they ask, okay, so would you use an app that does this and that? So these are like three common mistakes that early stage startup entrepreneurs do. And then, the bias gets only like bigger and bigger. And you get like bad information, bad data, and which, one thing leads to another, and you don't have like the data that will help you build a sustainable business.
So I want to jump into that. And I mean, I think we could talk about why you mentioned those are mistakes to do, but I'd rather jump into social data research, the topic of the day. So first of all, in a sentence, what is social data research? Just so we can be on the same page here. Define that for me.
Yeah, so definition also changes, right? Because it's like a new thing relatively. So you'll hear different definitions from different people in different times. But generally, social data research is the collection and analysis of social data information, such as discussions and posts and threads and tweets, and yeah, all the things that, and discussions on forums, videos on TikTok can also be counted as social data. So basically, so this is like the general practice. You collect and analyze posts from any type of social media platform or channel. So that's the broadest way to describe that. And more specifically, there are basically two ways to look at it. So you can, what people are mostly familiar with are social data monitoring software, which these are like companies like Brandwatch, like Sysomos, just to mention two of the like largest in the world right now. Crimson Hexagon, which was recently purchased by Brandwatch. So these are software that companies that actually collect, they harvest public available social media conversations. So from forums, from news websites, from Facebook pages, from Twitter, of course, everything that is publicly available. That's important to emphasize the publicly available thing, because you do not, I mean, those companies, they do not collect like dark social info data. They do not collect like private conversations, like from Messenger or from WhatsApp or other types of personal communication. And what, yeah.
No, so I just want to ask at this point, kind of, I think most of the people watching this season of UXR Conversations are probably in the field of UX research, or they want to be. Why should UX researchers add this method, which we'll get into, like how you do that, to their stack of methods? What's the benefit there, in your opinion?
Yeah. So again, so there is this one approach, which is to use the software. Normally, these types of companies, this type of software tend to be really expensive. So it really, you will normally see that only like in big companies, because they tend to be quite expensive. But the other approach is to do that manually, just to do your own research, to find the relevant channels and groups and tweets that are relevant to your research, to your field, and do that manually. I mean, it's a lot. It can be harder. It's not as easy, but it can be very effective. So the main difference is that when you get this software, so you can learn about what people are talking about or writing about, and how much do they do that. So for example, if you want to study, I don't know, like how people talk about, I don't know, ice cream. So what it gives you, I mean, the software enables you to understand, to learn how much people are talking about ice cream, where, like in which countries, whether they're talking about ice cream along with I don't know, chocolate or vanilla, or you can like try different combinations to see what people are talking about, how much, where, when do they talk about ice cream, during the winter, during the summer. So everything related to trend analysis, which is why those software tend to be, I mean, you can use them for both market and user research. So you can learn, you can, get all those incredibly interesting quantitative data, right? About a subject, about a company, about everything you want. You just, I mean, how it works, you normally just type like a query, like you do on Google, just type the words that you're interested to learn about, to research, and then you get all those stats and analytics, right? But in addition, you also get to see like the original post or tweet, so like in verbatim. And that gives you the qualitative part. So that's one of the best things about doing social media analysis, is that you get qualitative data in quantities, right? So in contrast to doing like interviews or, I don't know, focus groups, so you're limited, right, with the number of people you can talk to, and it takes time, and you have to recruit them, and there's a ton of bias, right, because you actually need to ask questions, and if you don't ask something, you will not get answers. But when you go into social media, you get like it's like an ocean. It's unstructured, so you get tons of data, which can be sometimes hard to figure out what's important or where to find your specifically relevant, whatever is relevant for your needs. But that's part of the challenge. So I guess like generally, if I want to really emphasize or to explain like the benefit of using social data in when you compare it to other types of tools that we have, of methods, is, so first, since you have all the data available and accessible for you, again, whether you're using software or not, even if you're just using, the Twitter search bar, or you're using Reddit, you can use search bar there, or on Facebook. So there are a lot of sources that you can, a lot of ways that you can use social media to learn about users, their behavior, their needs, their thoughts, their problems, And what is one of the biggest advantages is that you don't have to actually talk to people, to users, which can sound a bit, maybe how is that an advantage, right? Because as researchers, we want the friction, we want to hear from our users. But sometimes, because people on social media, people just sharing their experiences, their thoughts in an unsolicited way. Nobody asked them to. They just do it because they want to share, they want to ask, they want to learn, and they want to complain, right? This is one of the most prominent things, like popular or most people tend to complain a lot about, especially about brands, right, on social media. So if you're, I mean, on the one hand, there are companies or brands that think, well, I'm not going to use social media because I only get like complaints. So that's not like very helpful, right? And I say just the opposite. This is a great opportunity to learn what your customers, what your users are complaining about, and you can learn how to make it better for them, like improve the experience.
By the way, when you talk about kind of manual versus using a couple of the big software packages, there's a lot in between that, right? So for example, I'm referring to if you use R or Python, then there are packages for this type of analysis. Or if you use platforms like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey to run surveys, then they also have certain kind of social analysis options depending on what you're using. So there's a lot in between fully manual kind of searching through my company's Twitter feed to see what people are saying and using a couple of very kind of large, well-known software pieces. Is that accurate, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have those tools, you can use Python, to harvest Twitter. I mean, there's a limit to what you can do, right? Because there are like you cannot like endlessly harvest Facebook or Twitter, because that's like against terms of use. But yeah, you can do. I mean, sometimes like we do qualitative research, we don't necessarily need tons of data, right? We just need enough to understand some kind of experience. And once we do that, like on a regular basis, we can learn a lot. I mean, we know there are like advantages and disadvantages to qualitative research in general, but so this is something which is like you can enjoy both worlds, whether you do it manually or with software. And yeah.
And do you see, so I think it's easier for me to comprehend how this type of research can inform kind of top of funnel stuff, indeed the market research side, hear about certain needs or barriers that my customers are having that I wasn't aware of previously. I do struggle to still figure out how this can also inform product decisions within the user experience of the products I'm building. Again, more in the realm of UX research. So it's okay if we can only keep this to hypothetical examples, or maybe you can give an example from your startup or whatever you feel comfortable with. But I'd love to unpack a bit more how this can be used for in-product decisions compared to more top of funnel marketing and market research kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So one example that I like to use is Reddit, which is a great source for social data research. Because let's take, for example, Airbnb, right? So Airbnb has a subreddit with about
I've been on it. I've been on it a lot.
Like
Been there, done that.
30,000 users, which is amazing. So let's say, for example, that you want to improve things about your app, you want to learn about where users are struggling. So you can use you can search for specific words. For example, I don't know, you can use for the word like scam, just to understand what happens, what type of scams people are experiencing when they're using, like, I don't know, platforms in general. That's a very common common thing. So you can get really specific, and you can learn about also a lot about usability issues. You just need to find, the right keywords, and it can be, a name of a feature, or to find a way to articulate the type of a problem you're looking to understand more about. And using those keywords, again, even if you don't have software, you can just use the search bar on Reddit, for example. So you can find people are, talking about those type of things, like customers issues or sellers issues, or a payment issues, for example, right? You can just type,
Yeah.
I don't know, like PayPal even, and then you see like a bunch of posts of people like, saying something about using PayPal on the platform. So you can just, the basic like technique is to carefully to think about, specific keywords that can give you insight to whatever it is you want to learn about the product, the experience, the usability issues. And sometimes you'll find things that you never thought about, and for example, you may think that your users are using specific feature for what you intended it to be used for, but you can, when you go into social media, you can find out that people are using it for completely different purposes. Actually, seen that with Intercom, a company you're also familiar with. So they found on Twitter that people use their map features to show off to investors, right?
Yeah.
And they found out about that on Twitter,
Yeah.
which is like a very cool use case, right? Because if they didn't, if they hadn't saw that, they wouldn't have improved. And one of the consequences once they saw that was to improve the map feature, right?
Yeah. 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 No, totally.
Yeah.
Is one of the challenges with this type of research figuring out what those keywords are, what to look for in the first place, if that makes sense? And I'm wondering about whether some of the tools you can use to do this research help you discover what's going on in the conversations on Reddit, on Twitter, because that's the tough part, right? Like even when I'm using Google for personal reasons, it's an incredible search engine. The problem is you need to know what you're searching for. Now, granted, let's say I'm working at Airbnb, which I used to do, and let's say I'm working on the booking experience, which is what I used to do. So yes, I suppose I could start by searching for booking or payment or search if I was working on search within the Airbnb Reddit. But I'm wondering how much of a challenge that is, and how much of your workflow of social data research is consumed by that stage. Or in other words, another thing that people who don't work with data a lot maybe don't realize sometimes is that so much of working with data is cleaning up that data and preparing it for analysis. So I'm kind of curious to hear, I guess, about the workflow of social data research and the challenges within that workflow.
Yeah, so it's a lot of it is like back and forth, which is something that I really like about this method, because when you start with, like you said, I have these general terms that I'm thinking of, like general keywords like booking, like payment, whatever, and then you start reading stuff, and then you get more and more familiar, throughout time with the terminology that people are using, and they're using it again and again and again. So then you add up a bunch of other like keywords that you learned from reading, right? You assemble this bucket of terminology that people are constantly using. Maybe you were familiar with it, some of it, maybe some of it is new to you. Maybe there's, you start to understand like the jargon and things that people are talking about like frequently. And then you add more keywords to narrow your search, because if you like type, let's say you're not using a software. So if you only type like payment or booking, you will get a lot of results. So you can narrow it down in all sorts of ways. You can, narrow it down. It depends what platform you're using. and how advanced its search capabilities are. But you can narrow it down, and you can like do that, on a regular basis, especially when you start off, until you like understand the discourse, the general discourse around this product or this specific feature, or whatever it is that really interests you. And as you you get you start to adopt this habit of constantly coming back to the same, whether it's subreddits or groups or sometimes even tweets. So you learn about a lot. You learn more about this phenomena, the way users articulate what they feel about it, and you get better. And if you use the software, and so you can sometimes you have this feature of word cloud, so you can see all the words that people are using.
Yeah.
And then you can actually click on one of the words. Let's say that one of the most prominent words around the discourse around Airbnb is booking. Okay, just like I guess, right? So you can click on the word booking, and then you get a bunch of other keywords, and so forth. Yeah. So it's like you can really like drill down, but you can also maintain like this wide angle perspective and just see what interests you and go deeper there and discover things that some of them you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Yeah.
Which is part of the fun. Yeah.
Makes sense. We have a few questions here, which I'd love to start taking. A request first, though. Tiana, if you could clarify your question. I'm not sure I'm quite following what you mean. So I'd love for you to tell us more about what you mean by your question. For now, let's go to Vijay's question, which is something I was also curious about, which is around the limitations of this method and working around those limitations, and how do you address pushback that you get from clients of yours or stakeholders when it comes to social research? Earlier on you mentioned the limitations of interviews and focus groups, etc. And I think it's quite apparent that you lean towards the quantitative,
Not
given
at
your
all.
not at all.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Are you being? I'm not sure if you're kidding or are you being serious.
I'm not. I'm actually more of a qualitative person.
So I apologize.
But I like the one of the things that I like about the software and this approach is that it kind of
Lens
kind
the
of
two.
makes a debate between what's better, qualitative or that makes it like a bit like obsolete, because you have them both in the same like.
So let's address both of those questions, because I think there's really two questions here. One is, what sort of pushback do you get on this type of research, and how do you address it? And two is, how do you work around the limitations that this type of research has?
Well, let's start with the second question. So limitations are great, I think, because it's good to have constraints, right? But okay, I think I'll try to answer it like maybe simultaneously. So yeah, I do get sometimes pushbacks. I have to say that less and less people are starting to get more familiar with the advantages of using social data research. But yeah, people say, okay, it does not. I mean, people are only, like I said before, people are mainly using social to complain, so that's not very helpful. So that's one thing. And people are saying it's not representing like the entire population, which is true, because of course we have the self-selection bias, because not everybody is using social, not everybody is using every channel. I mean, you maybe you're using Facebook, but you're not using Twitter, vice versa. So you have to know what type of demographic use what type of channel, and to understand that the data that you're getting is, you have to remember that who are the people who are using this platform. So yeah, you have to know that, you have to be aware of that limitation, but it can also be an advantage, right? Because if your audience, you know that they are on Instagram, or you know that they are on a specific, forum, so that's great. That's actually an advantage, not a disadvantage, because makes your life actually easier. It allows you to be much more focused on on who you're interested in. Um,
And then
I
and then
would
work and then working around these kinds of limitations. So what's the trick there?
Well, there's no like trick. I mean, there's lots of things that you can learn. There are things that you cannot do with social because yeah, people are talking a lot about a lot of things, but there are things that they are not talking about or not writing about, or not enough, or not in a public sphere, or it's not available for you from whatever reason, or there's just not enough discussion about certain topics. So yeah, sometimes you don't have enough data to work with. That can happen, definitely. But so another thing that is important to remember that again, the best thing to do, like generally, is to use triangulation, right? One of our favorite words. So if there are things that you cannot do with social, or you can maybe do with surveys if you have no choice, or with other types of to find data in other ways. But again, it's something that you have with every method. It has its limitations.
Sure.
But it's not like, I mean, normally you get so much more than you lose, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Arcana brings up another interesting potential limitation or risk, which is, she's asking, how do you differentiate between authentic and hyperbolic elements on social media, especially when you don't know the intention? I mean, there's something about social media, right? You almost have to be somewhat hyperbolic and clickbaity, and there's a certain language that appears on social media which doesn't appear elsewhere. Do you feel like you need to somehow correct for that bias in your research? Do you agree there is a bias within social media and comments on social media?
Yeah, well, that really depends on the topic because, for example, I mean, there are topics where people discuss with a very, authentic way, and there are areas where you can see not only like hyperbolic language, but you can see a lot of interventions, a lot of like commercial discourse, like for example, commercial or political, right? You can see you can see the work of bots, and you can see people are trying to influence, like influencers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that too, especially in political discussions. So that specifically type of research that is really hard, I mean, for me to do, because it's really hard to discern between authentic and like influencers comments. So yeah, that's not very reliable. So yeah,
Okay.
that can be definitely a problem. Another way to there are like tricks to know if someone is just like typing the same comment again and again and trying to spread it. The software they have like ways to overcome that. They make it like they really help. They're really one of the benefits of using a software is that most of them have some sort of ability to clean the data. And once
Yeah.
you see things like in like the entire amount of data, so you can find patterns, and you can, I mean, but it's a matter, again, like everything else, you need to have like some experience, and once you start doing that more and more, then you start just to understand what is authentic and what is less. You get like that feeling of that, I
We
guess.
will we will run out of time soon, although that time limit is kind of random, but I do try to keep these to 45 minutes or so. And I have to ask, I feel, compelled to talk about ethics and privacy and security. In the past few years, we've seen cases where this has gone terribly wrong, including things like the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal and Facebook. And I think that there have been many learnings from that and realizations for all of us, both as users, clients, customers, and as researchers too. And I'm very curious to hear your perspective on this and how we can continue to do this type of valuable and important research, but in a way where people's privacy and security are kept safe, in a way that's respectful of people, in a way that doesn't almost bring to the ruin of democracy in the United States and other countries, which is basically where we got to previously. What's just your general philosophy on this and how you apply this research?
Yeah, so generally, I think yeah, there is this connotation when you talk about social media, like monitoring, or people automatically think about spying on people and getting their personal data and Cambridge Analytica, and I think this connotation is happening, yeah, because things that happened. But what Cambridge Analytica did actually has nothing to do with this type of research. I mean, but it's all about, I mean, ethics. It's all about intentions, right? So you can use each type of technology to do good, to do bad. It's not the technology that is like inherent, or not the method that is inherently like problematic or evil or whatever. And
but still, I would love if you could clarify the difference, to your point, between
yeah,
what Cambridge Analytica did, although this isn't just about Cambridge Analytica, but what Cambridge
right,
Analytica did and
right.
what we're talking about today. What's the difference?
Yeah. So I can give several examples. So, but generally speaking, I think it's like social data, like big data, is like I see it like nuclear power, right? You can use it to do all sorts of things. Some can be horrible, some can be great. So, if, for example, you're an NGO and you're trying to understand, the society's stereotypes about mental health issues, right? So you can learn a lot about what how people are perceiving mental health issues when you see what kind of discussions, what can you learn from discussions about this topic, whether it's from people who are suffering from mental health issues, or whether people who are talking about it in whatever context, because people are talking in, it doesn't have to be about specific about that's another thing with social data, that the discussions, they're unstructured. So you can find people talking about ice cream while they're talking about, I don't know, their kids or their date last night, whatever. It can come in all sorts of contexts. It's not like survey when you get an answer to a question, and so that can be also again an advantage and disadvantages. So I think, again, what Cambridge Analytica actually did was to abuse data, right? And they also formed this weird like method where they took, first of all, they had access, which is now not possible. They had access to people's personal profiles, to if I remember correctly, which is something that social media monitoring software are not harvesting like at all. It's against the term of use of Facebook and other. And if it's like Twitter and other public platforms, so yeah, you can they collect the public data, but it's not related to the person. I have no information about who people are, except like general clustering, like those software do enable you to know what people are writing in their bio, like I'm a journalist, I'm a writer. So they do cluster those type of things, and you can see what those type of population, those type of audiences, what do they like, what words they're using, but it's not like person specific. And what Cambridge did was actually trying to cluster, types of people, and they actually created content for those people based on this, the five personalities, like theory, the big five that they were using, which you can, I mean, both the ethics was questionable and the efficiency of what they tried to do, that was also.
I think to your point, like there's two things here which really are important besides the intention which you mentioned. One is
Yeah,
if you're only using publicly available information, then you're already in a much better place than Cambridge Analytica was at the
definitely. Yeah.
time, because they were abusing certain pathways and APIs to people's
Hmm.
personal
Hmm.
data that they shouldn't have really had in the first place, and people didn't realize, given the user experience of these things, that they were giving that personal data. So
Right.
that's number one. And
Hmm.
number two, which you're mentioning, is if the data are aggregated and it's anonymized, and again it's based on public information, then when you couple both of those things with good intentions, or even if you decouple them, even someone with bad intentions, you can't do much when the data is all public and anonymized. So that seems to be the trick. And I'm glad we talked about this, because I do think that it's still something that's unclear to people. And I think that even people who saw this conversation was going to happen might have been wondering about what we mean about social data research and where you're getting that data from. And I think it's absolutely legitimate and helpful and ethical to conduct this research when your intentions are in the right place and you're using publicly available data that's anonymized and aggregated. I want to
Yeah.
ask you before we end, if people want to get into social data research and start, dabbling in using that method within their toolbox, do you have any tips on where to start? You mentioned a few things, like just going on a platform like Reddit or a platform like Twitter and running some searches. Do you have any other tips for people who are getting started in this particular space, this particular method?
Well, yeah, you can actually read. I found the blogs and like there's a lot of like ebooks and blogs you can read on the social media monitoring companies like Brandwatch. They have tons of information. I mean, most of it is about how to use like the platform. But again, you can learn so much about what you can learn even without using like software. You can do a lot of it by yourself, because like you said, the trick is, especially when you're getting started, is to try to think creatively of keywords. What do you want to search? What do you want to learn? And frankly, like once you just start with that, like what is your research question, what do you want to learn about your user experience, and you start like writing down some keywords, and then you search for those keywords inside where your users are, if you can find that. That's not always the case, but for example, if you have like a subreddit where you know your users are there, so you can do that. Or if you know that your users are in some other like social media, or if you know, for example, if you want to just learn what your users are saying about your app or competitors, so you can just use like either hashtag on Twitter, or just the name of the company, and then just start by reading, start like doing like traditional qualitative work. Just read a lot and find things that are repeating, and try to get used to it, like to understand terminology and what people are saying. And then one thing tends to lead to another, because suddenly you see this post and you see that some kind of phrase is like coming up again and again. So you can add that to your bucket of keywords. So that's
Yeah.
very like intuitive. There's a lot of intuitive into that research. It's not like very rigid, and but it takes time. I mean, you need to get really like deep and
Yeah.
to read a lot and to get used to that. But I mean, it comes naturally, especially where you're already familiar with other types of research methods.
Yeah. Yeah, Yael, we are out of time, and
Uh,
thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to find you, well, first of all, if you want to find Yael's company and maybe get a bit fitter, maybe do some yoga, then check out FitMyTime. Is there anything else you wanted to share about how people can reach out to you and what for?
yeah, sure. Feel free to reach out if you have like questions on LinkedIn. You have my email, I think, too. But yeah, I'm available, and please feel free to reach out with any question you may have. And thank you so much, Noam. It's been a treat. It's been a real pleasure. I'm so glad we did that.
I am too. And for everyone else watching, if you're in Israel, then have a good evening. And if you're around these parts, have a nice Sunday weekend. If you're looking for me, you know where to find me. And I'd love to chat about UXR conversations or UX in general, whatever you want. So I'm on the Twitter, on LinkedIn. That's my email. Get in touch. And goodbye for now. Until next time, which of course is going to be pretty soon. Don't worry, not done yet. More to come shortly. Bye for now.